Hi, and welcome to our lesson on ratios and proportions. So, the main idea, obviously, looking at this lesson is understanding ratios, what they are, and then being able to utilize ratios in proportions to solve different problems. So, simply put, a ratio is a statement of how two numbers compare, or more simply, think of it as a fraction. Like 3 over 4 is how 3 and 4 compare. 3/4 is 75%. So the idea of a ratio is just how two numbers compare, or simply a fraction. Now, a proportion is when an equation states that two ratios are equal. So if you think about simplifying fractions like you've done in the past, 2/4 is equal to 1/2. So that would be an example of a proportion. 2/4 is the same thing as 1/2. Or 16/32, so 16 over 32 equals 1/2. So a proportion simply is when two ratios are equal. And then the easiest way to solve any proportion. The idea behind proportions, which I'll typically describe as cross multiply, then divide. That's the real basic. Sometimes there's an extra step to solve for a variable, but typically it's just cross multiply, then divide. So we'll look at these proportions on how to solve. So when we say cross multiply, we mean diagonally. So in this case, 2 over x equals 3 over 4. So in order to solve for x, we're going to cross multiply. So 2 times 4 equals 3 times x. So in that case, 8 would equal 3 times x. So then cross multiply, done, then divide. So divide both sides by 3, and x is 8/3. So our answer here would be x equals 8/3. Don't need to worry about writing it as a decimal unless they tell you to. In B, 10 over 8 equals 5 over n. So we're trying to figure out what n is. So we're going to cross multiply 10 times n and 5 times 8. So 10n equals 40. Then, to solve for a variable, divide both sides by 10, and n would equal 4. Now it says solve each proportion, check your answer. There's a few ways you could check your answer. You could simply plug it into a calculator or do long division and get your decimal, 10 divided by 8, and then 5 divided by 4, and see if they equal the same thing. The other way that you can more simply check your answer is to just cross multiply. So if I'd set this up as 10 over 8 equals 5 over 4 to check my answer, 10 times 4 is 40, 5 times 8 is 40, so 40 equals 40, we're good to go. So the easy way to check your answer would be plug in what you get in place of the variable, and then simply cross multiply. If both are equal, then that's your answer. So cross multiply, then divide is the easy approach to solve any proportion where you're just looking for a single variable. Then if we move into something where there's a little bit more complexity, so x over 2 equals x minus 4 over 5, we'll still cross multiply first. So 5 times x is 5x, 2 times x minus 4 is the distributive property, 2 times x, and 2 times the minus 4 part. So that would be 5x equals 2x minus 8. Now we want to solve for x. So in this case, subtract the 2x from each side, and 3x equals negative 8. divide both sides by 3, and x would equal negative 8/3. In D, cross multiply 4x, and then negative 5 times the quantity x minus 3. So negative 5 times x is a negative 5x. Negative 5 times the minus 3 gives me the plus 15. Now we need to solve for x, so we're going to add the negative 5x to each side to get it back to 0. So that would be just adding 5x. So we'd have 9x equals 15. Then we'll divide both sides by 9, and x is 15 over 9, or if we simplify that, 5 over 3. Now in E, 7 over 2 equals negative 9 over 3w. Cross multiply, 7 times 3w is 21w. Negative 9 times 2 is negative 18. Divide by 21 to get w. So w equals negative 18 over 21, which is a negative 6/7. In F, 9 over y plus 4 equals 5 over y. Again, we're going to cross multiply 9y, and then 5 times y plus 4, distributive property, 5y plus 20. Subtract the 5y from each side, so 4y equals 20. Divide by 4, and y equals 5. And our last few problems. In the case now where we're going to end up when we cross multiply with y or x or whatever our variable is, possibly to the second power. So when this happens, this is where you'll need to go back to the factoring skills we just covered and factor in order to solve. So let's look at G. 3y over 4y minus 1 equals 1 over y. So when we cross multiply, we get 3y squared equals 4y minus 1. So now we want to rearrange into standard form. So we'll subtract the 4y and then add the 1. So 3y squared minus 4y plus 1 equals 0. Now in order to solve that, I need to factor my trinomial on the left. This factors to 3y minus 1 times y minus 1. Now, if you remember from our last few lessons, in order to solve for y, we set each one of these equal to 0. So 3y minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 and divide by 3. Y equals 1/3. Y minus 1 equals 0. Add the 1, and y equals 1. In H, cross multiply first, so we end up with 5p equals 4p squared plus 4p. Subtract the 5p from each side. 4p squared minus p equals 0. Then I can factor out the p. 4p squared minus p, both can be divided by p, and that would give me p times the quantity 4p minus 1. Set each part of this equal to 0, so p equals 0, simply gives me p equals 0. 4p minus 1 equals 0. Add the 1, divide by 4, and p equals 1/4. And now our last two problems for today's lesson. In I, we have x minus 2 over x plus 6 equals x over 2. So we're going to cross multiply first. 2 times x minus 2 gives us 2x minus 4. X times x plus 6 gives me x squared plus 6x. Rearrange into standard form. So in this case, what I did was just rearrange so I get all of my variables and constants on the same side and equal to 0. So I subtracted the 2x and added 4. So I ended up with x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0. This here is a perfect square trinomial. So when I factor that, I get x plus 2 to the second power. Now to solve that, I just take x plus 2 equals 0. So x would equal a negative 2. And our last problem, J, 5x over x plus 7 equals x over x minus 1. Cross multiply first, so we end up with 5x squared minus 5x equals x squared plus 7x. Then we need to rearrange into standard form, so subtract the x squared and subtract the 7x, and we get 4x squared minus 12x equals 0. Both parts here can be divided by 4x, so I factor out the 4x. So I have 4x times x minus 3 equals 0. Set 4x equal to 0. Divide by 4, and x is still 0. X minus 3 equals 0. Add 3, and x equals 3. So our two answers would be 0 or 3.